everyone. Happy Saturday from beautiful Seattle. My name is Parimal Deshpande. I'm the host for Earth is Our Witness, a platform where we invite inspired photographers to share stories of interconnectedness. Today, we have a great guest, a really close friend of mine, Phil Borges, and we have a topic that we're going to talk about, which is about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and what it means and why it matters, and shared through powerful images of human dignity, human spirit of the tribal people and the indigenous people. So with that, I just want to welcome my really good friend and an awesome photographer, Phil Borges. Phil, welcome to Earth is Our Witness. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to see you, Parimal, once again.
Once again, that's right. We had you back last year to talk about Tibetan portrait, the power of compassion. That was really deep and that was fun too. Although the difference is this time we don't have art. He's traveling. He's somewhere in the middle of Africa and he's traveling. Last time we had him.
Traveling.
He's always traveling. Like art is a restless soul. Can we just roast him since we don't have him? Let's just roast him a little bit because I need to pay back to him. He roasted me when I missed one of his tequila times. So I'm just looking for this opportunity.
No, I don't dare roast art.
I will take the liberty. Here's the good thing. And admit it, Phil. We don't have to laugh at his bad jokes anymore because he's not here, right? Yes?
No, actually, I laugh at most of his jokes.
No, we're gonna miss
Art.
Art.
Doesn't think they're funny.
We are going to miss Art. I'm sure if he's watching, Art, we love you. We'll keep going and you can join us soon when you're back. So for that, Phil, to hand it over to you. And of course, I want to welcome our audience too. Towards the end, I'll take some live questions from the audience, both on YouTube and Facebook. So anyone watching right now live, keep the questions coming, keep the comments coming. Don't forget to share if you like the show. It really encourages us to do more. So Phil, with that, tell us about the topic enduring spirit, the name and what it means, and what's the connection between that and Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
Well, by the way, Parimal, you're always getting me to go back in my past. I did this project 22 years ago. So it was fun just going back and refreshing my memory about the whole thing. Well,
it's timeless.
Yeah, well, it came about when I was sharing images with Amnesty International. And they told me that they wanted to do this celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it turned 50 in 1998. And what they wanted to do is get 10 million signatures from around the world, mostly in North America and Europe, a little bit in South America. They wanted to hold events where people would come and sign and rededicate themselves to the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. And we started talking and I said, where are you going to hold these events to get the signature? And they said, well, we're not sure about that yet. And I said, what's going to be there beside the book? And they said, well, we're not completely sure about that either. So I just suggested, well, listen, I've been taking I've been documenting indigenous and tribal cultures around the world. I have a lot of images. Maybe we could put together a show and then I could contact my galleries in Europe and over here in the United States and some of the museums, and we could hold them in the galleries and museums. And they said, great. And then I said, you'll probably want a book for this as well. And they said, yes, of course, we want a book. So, my first book on Tibet took me 8 months to convince them to publish it, Rosa.
Okay.
And because I had never done a book before. And so, anyway, so I just told Rizzoli, we're going to have all these exhibits. There were about 50 to 60 exhibits in all. And they're going to want to sell a book at each one of the exhibits. And so they literally crashed what they called crashed the book. They had it out within, let's see, I talked to them in October. We had it in October, November. We had it in 4.5 months, which was fast.
This is fast.
So we had to design it, put it together, get it approved, and yeah. So anyway, that's the way Enduring Spirit. I called it Enduring Spirit because it's the just most of the people I visited and the communities I visited have been around for centuries, some of them millennia, and living pretty much the same as they have for thousands of years.
Wow. It's powerful.
So yeah, so that's how it came about.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's start hearing and sharing the stories. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so let me pull these up.
Yep.
If I can get everything going here. Boom. Tell me if you can see it. Is it there yet? Okay.
And perfect. And let's go. There you go. I can see it perfectly.
Okay. Well, anyway, here's one of my great heroes, Eleanor Roosevelt. And she was the person who was behind the UDHR. She had been an activist during her life as a first lady. And at this point, 1948, of course, her husband had passed away. And so they asked her, the UN had just formed, World War II had just ended. So this whole idea of getting this Universal Declaration of Human Rights just was sort of built on the ashes of World War II and all the human rights violations, the Holocaust, everything that happened. They wanted to do something to prevent something like that from ever happening again. So she was the head, she was the chairperson on the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and she brought together 51 countries to decide on what they could and could not have in this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it took, I don't know how long, it was several weeks. And the members that were struggling with what they would have in it and what they wouldn't, they complained that she was violating their human rights because it was so difficult to put together. But they eventually did it, and there were only 3 countries that opted out of it. So they got 48 signatures, which made it pass. And I think it was Saudi Arabia, the Soviet Union, and I think South Africa were the 3 that did not sign at that time. So anyway, that's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and where it came from. And so we wanted to do this celebration, Amnesty did, and I wanted to support them in doing it.
Great. What a powerful quote.
So do you want me to go through some of the images?
Yes, would love to. Yeah.
So I've been out documenting the human rights issues in these cultures around the world for about almost 20 years at that point. And so I'll just tell you, one of the things that I wanted to do with my portraits, and mainly I was at that point in time, I was a portrait artist. And the thing I wanted to do is to take these individuals that we thought of as generalizations, abstractions, as indigenous people, and I wanted to make them individuals. So with each portrait I took, I did a little bio, a short bio about the person. So if you were looking at a group of images, say from Tibet, I would document everybody, I'd portrait everybody from the Dalai Lama to the most remote nomad and put together an exhibit. And if you read all those bios, you could pretty much tell what was going on or what I wanted to talk about in terms of the violation that was happening. So I'll just tell you a few of the stories as we go along here. This is a Paro. She's 85 years old. She's in the Samburu tribe. And she had 12 kids. And she was 85. Her youngest was 23. So she had a baby when she was 61 years old, which I found incredible. So she, much like Eleanor Roosevelt, was kind of the elder female statesman of the Samburu tribe. She's a very elegant woman. She was also raising another orphan that was a teenager. So, you know, her work wasn't done. And she just looked so strong to me and incredible. So her story was, you know, the Samburu, they're up in northern Kenya, and the Turkana, there are two tribes up there. And they historically, they're cattle, they raise cattle. So they historically would raid each other's cattle. And they actually looked at it as kind of something that was good for the cattle, because they wouldn't inbreed. They would cross over that way as they would steal each other's cattle. But the problem came about when all the wars happened up in the Sudan. They had all these Kalashnikovs coming in, and, you know, these warriors would trade a cow for a Kalashnikov. So instead of spears, when they do these raids, now they were doing them with Kalashnikovs. And it became very dangerous. And she had to actually leave her home because of one of the cattle raids that was coming a little bit before I got there and took this portrait. But anyway, that was one of their issues, was the flooding in of guns. So this is Irpi. Any questions?
No, I love this image. I love the gestures of these images. Even the previous one, the poise and the dignity, and this one is such a vulnerable moment you have captured on this one.
Yeah, well, she was mourning her great grandmother was on her deathbed in that little hut behind her there. And in that hut, she lives with her 6 brothers and sisters, her parents, her grandparents. I think there was an uncle and an aunt and the great grandmother, all living together in this hut. There were about 16 or 17 people. And that hut's only about 20 feet in diameter. Now, this is in Irian Jaya. She's in the Dani tribe over there. And these huts are about 1/4 mile apart. And I was staying there for about 2 or 3 days in this one area. And I was just checking in with the family and doing portraits here and there. And they had this steady stream of people coming out of the mountains and coming to see the grandmother and hold her by the fire and talk to her and stroke her hair and just, you know, telling her how much they appreciated her. I assume I had a translator, and he was kind of telling me what they were saying. And I just thought, how interesting, and how, I mean, can you imagine living in that tight of quarters with 17 of your relatives? There would be absolutely no secrets.
Yeah.
Everything would be out in the open. But the thing that really impressed me was how much love and devotion they were giving to this great grandmother, who eventually died while we were there. And, you know, I just thought of how many people in our culture die alone in an old age home or in a hospice setting. Very few get to die at home, and especially surrounded by the people they've known all their lives.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I've noticed about being in these indigenous and tribal cultures, is how much what we used to call FaceTime before iPhone took over FaceTime. I mean, it was how much time they spend together and how connected they are.
Hmm. I have a question, Phil. Um, do you find a difference in the Western cultures, the definition of self, uh, and
That's a
compare that to Eastern cultures or cultures where there are larger families for how to define yourself? Is it by a family or is it just it's about me? Do you find a difference, a notable difference?
Well, they definitely identify themselves, especially tribal people, by their tribe. And the interesting thing, they'll be very, very tight within the tribe, but they may be at war with the tribe next door to them. And so they definitely identify strongly with their group. And, our culture is a very individualistic culture, and there's
Hmm.
advantages to that. We have individual freedoms and we can think outside of the box more and we invent more, but there's also downsides to it. We're quite isolated. And
Hmm.
so that in itself causes a lot of mental health issues or
Yeah.
isolation. And they don't have that isolation. I mean, they're fully engaged with each other all the time. And really, that's the way our brains developed.
Yeah.
We developed in hunter-gatherer societies of 30 to 50 people, and very tightly close-knit, constantly. You knew you were interconnected and interdependent with everybody.
Yeah.
So in
You know,
fact, these two kids here, Parso's just about to turn 5 in the foreground. Suma's about 8.
hmm.
Their job, they're in the Karo tribe in the lower Omo Valley of Ethiopia. Anyway, their job is at harvest time is to go into the field and stay there and guard it because baboons will come in and wipe out the crop
Ah,
within 24 hours. They'll take the whole crop down. And it's dangerous because baboons will also carry a kid away that's especially Parso's size.
yeah.
And anyway, they scream and yell if the baboons are coming, the warriors come and chase them away. So they know that they're very important to the tribal culture, I mean, to their tribe. They serve a very important role from the time they're, that young. So they have that sense of being so dependent upon, interdependent with the tribe, and that goes throughout their lifetime.
It's beautiful. I also, Phil, love the composition of the image. For what it's worth, I see the river that's connecting. It shows connectivity between people. I love the shape of the river, the shape of the boy's head, the belly. There are these beautiful curves in that image that are connecting. The lines, the leading lines are just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's the Lower Omo River,
Yeah.
filled with 20-foot crocodiles.
Oh my God.
A couple of kids saved me from them at one point, just pointing out these two little round things sticking up out of the water is just very, very muddy. You can't,
Again,
it's just uh,
I'm glad they saved them so we can have you for this talk today, just for that.
yeah. I mean, so here's another tribe down there in the lower Omo. It's the Mersey Tribe. And again, they're very tight within their own culture, within their own tribe. And one of the issues that was happening down there was Ethiopia set aside their land as a national park. And all of a sudden, they weren't able to herd their cattle down there at all. And this
Hmm.
caused all sorts of problems. And they all have the Mersey all have Kalashnikovs. And they had actually, right before I got there, killed the park ranger. And
Hmm.
so, and I had to take in a park ranger to go into the Mersey area.
Hmm.
So it was a little tense. I mean, it wasn't the most comfortable visit I've ever had with a tribal group.
Hmm.
That one time I went into the Mersey. But anyway, if you even raise your voice or have a disagreement within the tribe, they will have you work that out. Sometimes the tribe will gather around the couple that's having a problem until they settle their differences. But every scar on, this is Angino, his name is, he's 27 years old, but every scar in his arm, every curved scar is somebody he's killed in the neighboring tribe. So their circles of compassion, so to speak, are quite small. And they're very good at getting along with each other, but anything outside of their tribe often can be the other, and they're at war with them.
What's the reason for that paradox, Phil? The compassion, circle of compassion is strong but small. Anything inside, work it out. Outside, it's at war. How do you reconcile that paradox?
Just they depend on the tribe to survive, and they, like you say, how do they identify themselves? They identify themselves as the tribe. Now, they're not always at war with an adjacent tribe, but in this case, the Mersey were at war with the Hammer, I believe, at that time. There are 14 different tribes in this area of the lower Omo Valley of Ethiopia.
As you travel, Phil, or you meet from tribe to tribe, I'm assuming they know that you met the other tribe and you came over. Do you run into trust issues, and how do you break in, if you will?
Well, in that case, I had an interpreter. That was probably the most difficult tribe I've ever gone into, the Mersey, because of that situation with the park rangers. The park rangers had raided the Mersey the day before I got there and took like 13 of their Kalashnikovs away from them. So they were very tense about the whole thing. And I was taking these photographs with a view camera where I'd put a hood over my head and get everything focused and then come out. And my assistant was telling me every time I put that hood over my head, they were roughing up the park ranger. I'd get out and they'd act like perfect gentlemen.
That's funny. It's a beautiful image. Look at that.
This is a group called the Tao Batu. It's a tribal group down in the Philippines. It's on the island of Palawan. They live right on the side of this big volcano. And this is the shaman. His name is Norenko. He's 50 years old. And the thing I learned about their healers and their visionaries, what's interesting was they were identified by usually having some sort of a mental issue, seeing visions, hearing voices, having weird personality changes, mood swings, fainting spells. Many thought they were dying. And the elders, especially the older shaman in the tribe, would usually use those symptoms as an indication that they had potential shamanic abilities. And that was the case with Norenko. But yeah, and the other interesting thing I found, and I started interviewing a lot of shaman in my work. I was mainly doing human rights work, but I would love to find the healers and the visionaries and interview them. And in his case, I watched him do a ceremony for a guy that had a very strong fever. He'd come to him, and he, again, through interpreters, Norenko told this guy that his symptoms were because he was using slash and burn type of agricultural process where he would slash and burn to grow his crops. And he said he was angering the mountain spirits. And I thought, well, that, what will that do for his headache? But I've heard things like this since that time. And you know, in a way, it's connecting the person back to the environment. And they put spirit energy in everything, in the mountains, in the forest, in the rivers, in the sky, and the animals, in their ancestors. And so to them, everything is alive with this spirit energy. And they believe, many of them, that they've come from a spirit world. They'll be going back into a spirit world. So it's just like this continuum of spirit energy that they're immersed in.
It's, on that front, Phil, by the way, that reminds me, we spoke to Wade Davis a few 10 days back, and he said something similar. Wade said that having a relationship, what kind of a relationship you have with your environment defines how you look at it. And I thought that was exactly what he said here. Very insightful, because if you look at a mountain as a piece of rock, you're going to mine it. But if you look at it as a deity, you're going to worship it, and that can define your connection. It's a very powerful insight on how you look at things can define how you feel those things around you. So I had a question. Do you have to, as a photographer, believe what your subject believes, say what we just talked about? And does that make a difference? Yes, regardless of yes or no, does that make a difference in the image or the feeling you're trying to capture?
No, I mean, you know I haven't grown up in these groups, so I don't share their beliefs. I haven't been raised with their beliefs. But there were times when I would say, like, I saw one shaman woman in Mongolia give this woman that was having trouble with her pregnancy this cloth to sew in a different way, and then take it up to the mountain to appease the mountain spirits. And I thought to myself at the time, what good is that going to do? But I come around to seeing the value in what they do and not put it into my belief system. So again, I saw that in terms of reconnecting to the whole. And I've come to believe, especially after I've done this last project called Crazy Wise, which is a whole other subject, but that one of the most healing things you can do for somebody is reconnect them to the people and things around them in a profound way. I think isolation and a disconnection is one of the big factors for disease. In other words, being ill at ease and being with your body and with the environment, with everybody around you, is not a good thing.
Thank you.
This is another shaman, Sakulan in the Samburu tribe again, in northern Kenya. And she had that, at 14, she started having visions, hearing voices. She was frightened. She didn't know what was happening. She was having fading spells, and she had an older grandmother take her aside and tell her that she had this special sensitivity, and that she had to learn to work with it. And the grandmother helped her in her initiation go through that process. Now she's a mother of 5 kids, but she still carries out all her shamanic duties in addition to raising her kids. And
I love this image. In fact, Phil, I have this image. I don't know if you remember, but I have a fine art print of this image at my home.
Oh, right, because you generously supported us in Crazy Wise.
That's right. And I love this image, and I have always loved Sakulans, kind of the shape of the head, if you will, and the tree. And there's so much parallel between the two. It's like wisdom and just, sympathy and compassion just coming out of both of them in some ways.
Yeah, she was something. Yeah, and in fact, this is where Crazy Wise began, because all those symptoms in our culture are looked upon as they're pathologized. It's looked upon as a psychosis.
Hmm.
And so that is how that whole film came about later on.
Crazy Wise. We're going to have you come back to talk about Crazy Wise. It's a really interesting concept about shamans and how do you look at spiritual awakenings.
Yeah. So this is Linza. She is a shaman in Siberia, over on the very eastern part of Siberia, near Khabarovsk, in a little town called Bulava. She's in the Ulchi tribe. She was, whoops, sorry about that. Let me see if I can turn that off. She was about 87 years old and actually passed away a couple of weeks after we were there visiting her area. And all the shaman in the Soviet Union had to go underground during the Soviet Union. But when it broke up in 1989, they all came out because they'd been practicing underground, but they came out in the open. And so when we were over there, sorry, the telephone was going crazy. We met about 3 or 4 of the older shaman women, and Linza was one of them. But, this is Sasha. She's 9 years old. She's over in that area. She's in the Amur River here, which stays frozen about, 6 months out of the year. But we're there in the summertime and they're going swimming. But Sasha has all the symptoms of having a shamanic capability. But it really saddened me to hear that Linza had passed away because that was her mentor.
Oh.
So she's going to be left without anybody to mentor her through her difficult time, because when somebody goes through that, it's just like when people go through it over here, they don't have anybody that understands what's going on to help them along. It can lead to all sorts of problems.
How do all these tribes resolve, or if there are any human rights violations, for example, how do they know what is right and wrong in terms of violations, and how do they defend against perpetrators or aggressors that are probably way more powerful than them?
Well, they don't usually. I mean, so here's, for instance, this is Pau. She is from, it used to be called Burma, now Myanmar. And she's living in northern Thailand because she had to escape because the government at the time was doing kind of an ethnic cleansing, much like they're doing just recently with the Rohingya. And so she's in the Karen tribe, and she's escaped. Well, she had escaped 25 years before I took this photograph, and had to live in northern Thailand. So there's a lot of indigenous people shoved off their land. We did it with the Native Americans here in America. It's happened all over the place. It's happening in the Amazon, as you know, now, as they're, deforesting the Amazon to raise cattle so we can eat meat. So, I mean, it's just a common story. And so their human rights are being violated all the time. This is another group. This is Abby Ghoul. She's 7 years old. She was she became my assistant. She wouldn't leave my side the whole time I was in the Kailash valleys. They live right on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, up in the northern frontier district. And this group called the Kailash, there's only about 3,000 left. They're animists, and they're completely surrounded by Islam. And so they've been there they believe they're descendants of Alexander the Great's army. So blue-eyed, fair skin. They don't hide, the women don't hide their faces. So they're kind of popular with the Pakistan men who want to come and see them. But the problem, Abby Ghoul's dad was very active in preventing the deforestation of the Kailash valleys. The Pakistan government and several companies were in there harvesting a lot of the trees. And he became very important and was getting the laws passed through the Pakistan courts. So somebody assassinated him by throwing a bomb down their chimney. And Abby Ghoul was in the house when that happened. And you could just tell that there was something very deep about her, just the way she was very quiet. She wanted to help me and carry my bags and set up the lights and cameras and all that. But she was very serious at the same time.
I love the eyes. Oh my God, these eyes are beautiful. And I know you have at your home, you have this. When I've been to your place, I've seen the beautiful kind of large print.
Yeah.
Love the eyes.
I just loved her presence. There was something about it that was just a little bit otherworldly.
It is.
So this is on the Navajo Nation. I've just picked some random shots here to talk about different issues.
Yeah.
This is Bessie Cly. She's about 53, I believe, in this shot. And she lives on the Navajo Res. And the thing that was going on in the Navajo reservation while I was working with kids, you know, I did this project called Bridges, where I gave cameras to the indigenous kids and helped them. I'd get a group of photographers together and we'd help them make a movie about the issues going on in their community. And the issue the kids chose, and Bessie Cly was helping them, was there was a coal company that wanted to transport the coal in a slush. They grind up the coal and they move it through pipelines with water. Well, water is a real scarce resource down on the Navajo Res, especially now since climate change. And they were fighting that at the time, and they eventually prevailed. But that's another thing, you know, they're constantly being taken over for their land, for the mineral rights, for whatever power companies or
resources.
Individuals want resources. They find a way to get it.
I'm gonna, quote Amy Gulick that we interviewed. We had her talk about the salmon way on Earth is Our Witness, and I think what you're trying to say, she said something very similar, is that if you look at the environment as a resource, it's one thing. And a lot of these tribes, what they have in common is they look at it as a relationship, not as a resource. With them in the center of how can I use this for my purpose? It's not that, it's a relationship.
That's right. It's part of them.
Part of them. It's interconnected.
And really, I mean, even the neuroscientists are coming around to the view now that this thing we call ourselves is really a mental construct, and that we are part of everything. We're intimately interdependent and interconnected with everything, and our view of ourselves as a separate individual is really a mental construct that we build from birth. And so what the Buddhists have told us all along, that the self is an illusion, and Hindus, as you know, there's all of a sudden some scientific proof talking about it, which has been fascinating to me. This is Silbo, and he's 17 years old. he's in the Hamar tribe, again down on the lower Omo. And he's getting ready for what they call it's a rite of passage ceremony called the Bulla. And what he's going to have to do is he'll get naked and run over the backs of 30 bulls, just jumping up on them, running across the backs of 30 bulls, back and forth 4 times. If he falls, he will be whipped, and his mother will be whipped because she didn't feed him properly.
Okay. I'm just gonna say, if my son doesn't do great in school, I will not be whipped for that. And he's listening. He's hearing me like, no, he would.
So, and he will never be able to get married until he passes that rite of passage. So it's a very intense scene. So it was coming up for him in, I think it was 3 weeks when I met him. So I got a couple of shots. Here's a bulla in action. Can you see the guy on the back of the bulls back there?
Yes, I can. Yes.
And so the other thing that goes on, women are girls that adore the guy, are attracted to them. They will be whipped. And I don't know who whips them. Can you see their backs?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I do.
I mean, they're whipped severely. They end up with these big keloid scars across their back, and they wear that as a badge of honor that they've really supported this person going through the bullet.
Wow.
So it's interesting.
So let me ask you. Sorry to interrupt. How did they get these marks at the back?
With a whip.
Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't see them do it, but I know that that's what happens. And I know the mothers get whipped if the boy falls. At least that's what I was told by my guide.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. I mean, again, I don't romanticize indigenous people and tribal people, and I see their beauty and their power and their sacred devotion to the environment is very positive. But there's things that you look at, you go, my God, this is in the Dani tribe in Irian Jaya. And every time, and this is Horik, she's 43 years old. Every time someone close to a female in the Dani tribe dies, they'll cut off a finger in memory of that person. In fact, there was an 18-year-old girl that was a sister of one of the porters, one of the guides I had I took 4 weeks and went into a certain part of Irian Jaya, and his sister cut her finger while we were on the trip. But so Horik has no digits. She has her thumbs, but she's missing all her digits. And that is done, the women do that. On the other hand, the men only cut a piece of their ear, and they'll only do it once. So I asked him, why don't you keep chopping away at your ear then when somebody else dies? They said, well, we wouldn't be able to hear after a while. So, I mean, women, I did a whole series on the issues that women face in some of these cultures. They're really put at a disadvantage in many ways. Of course, as you know, there's female genital cutting. There's a lot of issues that women face that
Phil, is it possible? I mean, you use a really very interesting word, which is you don't romanticize the tribes for what it's worth. And I think what you're trying to say is that while you appreciate the good that they have in terms of connection with nature and what have you, there are things that boggle your mind, or something clearly you would not endorse, if you will, right? Or you would not want that life for you. Is it possible to take the good but not the bad, or you have to take it?
Yeah,
Most.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I came away from all this work seeing the value in being connected and realizing how isolated I was in my own culture.
Mm.
I didn't think about it before until I saw how much time they spend with each other, how much they're devoted to each other, how much they are interdependent and depend upon each other.
Yeah.
But then I see, yeah, they're good, but their circles of compassion are relatively small. So you
Mm.
take a place like the United States, we've brought all these tribes together. And I mean, so we're much more evolved in that way. We still obviously have our problems with different um, ethnicities and different religious groups and all, but we're, we're in a rough patch right now, obviously.
For sure.
But
Yes.
um, but we're working on it.
Mm.
They haven't had to, so they haven't had to face that, and so that's one thing. The other thing is, in terms of what we look at as equal human rights, in terms of women and men, boy, you spend time in these cultures and you see how much work the women do.
Mm.
The young girls, they do the cooking, they collect the firewood. So here's Lourdes and her sister Benigna, and
Mm.
this is in Peru, and she's a Quechua, and she has her sister on her back all the time.
Oh,
She
wow.
gets to go to school, which is unusual sometimes because the girls have so much work to do. Usually it's just the boys that get to go to school. But
Mm.
she gets to go to school, but she has her sister with her the entire time she's at school.
Mm.
So she gets up in the morning, herds the cows up to the mountain, comes down, goes to school, goes back up in the afternoon, brings the cows back down, then starts cooking or bringing in the firewood. It's amazing how much work they have to do. And I think you asked me to do the Women Empowered series at some
Yes.
point.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'll talk about that later. But, you know, the disparity between the resources a woman gets, the education she gets, violence against women, maternal mortality, so many die in childbirth that could be prevented with a simple little pill that costs 40 cents to
Mm.
stop postpartum bleeding. I mean, sex trafficking. I mean, it just goes on and on. So yeah, there's big problems, but also there's the wonderful side too.
Wonderful sight. And what a beautiful image.
So I'll end with this one. This is Transito. She's in Ecuador. And I met her when I was hosting a program for the Discovery Channel. And she's known as the Rosa Parks of Ecuador.
Mm.
She was born, she's 91 years old here. By the way, I did this in 2000, so she's probably gone now for sure. But she was 91. And when she was a teenager, she was part of the hacienda system. And by the way, she's Quechua, so she's indigenous and living in a Spanish dominated culture in and around Quito. And she was being molested by the hacienda owner, and she ran away, and they brought her back, and then she ran away again. So they threw her in jail and to make an example of her. And eventually she got her freedom, and she organized this boycott of all the indigenous farmers in Ecuador. They
Mm.
went on strike, and it essentially cut off the food supply in Ecuador. All of a sudden, all the Spanish were realizing, hey, we need these people. They feed us. And it changed everything. I mean, prior to that time, if a politician claimed he had any or revealed he had any indigenous blood, it would have been a complete political suicide. Now it's just the opposite. You want to have indigenous blood to be politically successful in many countries in South America now. But anyway, she was behind that whole boycott. So one of these legendary figures in
Wow. Lovely. Thank you so much, Phil. I do have a few questions, and I want to take a couple of questions from the audience too. But this has been terrific. It's been a really interesting conversation about the tribes, what you have learned, and also human rights, associations with each of these tribes. Speaking of the images, one question I'm going to ask from Sandra Grace is, Sandra is fascinated by the tonality of your images, and she thinks, I'm just going to read her comment. I see Kodak 6043 as the film used. Any insights would be appreciated for how you create this tone for these images, what film you use, and so on.
Yeah. So when I was shooting film, I would shoot Tri-X mostly. And I was usually shooting medium format Tri-X.
Yeah,
and what I would do is, I love black and white, but I wanted to put some warmth in it. And what I would do is I would mask out part of the print with this material called a frisket. And it made the print, I'd make a black and white print. Then I would mask out the part I didn't want to tone and just dip the whole thing in a toning bath, a sepia toning bath. And that's how I got the tones. And in today's world with digital, I've done this a bit as well. I do it in curves in Photoshop, and I just take and boost in curves, just boost the red channel and decrease the blue channel and get the tone I want. And then you can literally, with a mask, just paint it on.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Back to the topic of enduring spirit for tonight's conversation. You were telling me offline, which I would love for you to share with the audience. Tell us a story about when you actually had the exhibit of enduring spirit with Amnesty International at the White House. How did that go, and what was the setting like with Bill Clinton? And you told me that literally that day he was being impeached when this happened. So tell us a bit about
so we had the exhibit everywhere, at the UN and in museums and galleries around the world. And there was Human Rights Day, and I can't even remember the year it was when it was, the exhibit was 50 images. And I think at the White House, they had about 25 images for this Human Rights Day. And both Hillary and Bill Clinton were speaking. And we all knew, I guess there were about 60 people in the audience when they were speaking in the White House. And I was invited because I had the exhibit there, for one. And secondly, a friend of mine, Ford Roosevelt, who's part of the Roosevelt family, invited me as well. Anyway, both Bill and Hillary spoke, and you would have, I knew it was what was going on, but you would have never known it. They were so together and compartmentalized. So you can imagine, you have this friction between a husband and wife over what has happened. And on top of that, being impeached, the proceedings for impeachment were going on while he was speaking, but he was just, smiling and, shaking hands with everybody, and gave a wonderful speech and complimented Hillary on her magnificent speech. He said, I think it was one of your best. And Yeah, they're just masters at being able to compartmentalize. I would have been a nervous wreck.
Wow. Let's
Yeah.
let's end with this one question that I ask every one of our guests, Phil, and especially with the tribals and connected to human rights. Having witnessed what you have witnessed, if there's one thing we can all learn from the tribes, what would that be and why?
Again, I would say being connected with each other and with the environment, with the whole. Somehow profoundly getting to that place where you feel this connection. And that is what I've learned, the importance. And I've learned it in other ways as well, but I think that's one of the most important things. And learning to, especially at this point in our country and in the world to a certain extent, learning to listen to each other, non-judgmentally. We're all in these silos of belief now in terms of our politics, right? I listen to certain newscasts and read certain newspapers, and other people are reading something totally different. And we've demonized each other over it. We've got to learn how to come out of our silos and start listening to each other's sources of information, sharing ideas. I think that's what is so valuable about indigenous and tribal cultures or any different culture. I've learned so much stepping into these cultures that I didn't even realize about my own culture. And I see important things that I'm missing. And I see things that they do that really doesn't support the human condition, in the way women are treated, or the way they cut off fingers or whip each other. So it's that sharing of information and sharing ideas that gives our species its resiliency and strength. So I think that's what I've learned.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. If you want, you can go ahead and stop the sharing. We can get you back on full screen. But Phil, while you do that, thanks a lot. This has been great. We would love to have you back again. We have,
My pleasure.
Yeah. Go ahead and close that screen. I think
Here I go.
Yeah, perfect. We would love to have you back again, both for the Women Empowered, which is on International Women's Day that's coming up soon. We're going to have you back. And then also down the line for your project, Crazy Wise, which is about,
excellent.
and we would love to have, and that's what we do with all photographers we have, and we want to bring everyone back again for multiple bodies of work. With that, thanks, Phil. I do want to thank again for our audience for dialing in live. Hopefully this has been interesting. If you liked it, please do share with your friends and family. And as a reminder, the next talk is Wednesday evening, Seattle time. It's on Facebook and YouTube too live. And Phil, I'd love for you to join Wednesday as well as an audience, because I think you'll like the topic. It's called The Ghosts of Auschwitz-Birkenau. And
Wow.
it's about the work at the Auschwitz concentration camp by a photographer, Cole Thompson. And the reason we chose Wednesday is because I learned through our calendaring that Wednesday is actually the International Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's the perfect timing where we can all learn from what happened there, and some really interesting work that Cole has done. I'd love to have you there, join
I'll definitely be there. Yeah.
Good. Phil, thanks a lot. All our lovely audience, friends, and family, thanks a lot. And we'll see you soon.